The golden rule, treat others as you want to be treated, is common to most religions and cultures of the world. The idea is global. It's all over. Most religions, most cultures of the world, many different thinkers, believers, non-believers. It's important in families and professions. And a whole lot of people have given it as the summary of how to live, including Jesus, Hillel, Confucius, and lots more. And today it's part of a growing interfaith global ethics movement. I became a golden rule junkie in 1968 after hearing a talk by the Oxford philosopher R.M. Hare. And I went on to do lots of things involving the golden rule, including a master's thesis, a doctoral dissertation, many talks, papers, parts of many books. And my latest book, which is number 13, is totally on the golden rule. And it has two introductions. One is technical and analytic, and the other is simpler and uses stories. And I thought I'd pick out some pieces from the one with stories because it's maybe a little more entertaining. But they make kind of the same points, too. My first story is called The Old Man and His Grandson. And Westerners think of it as coming from the Brothers Grimm, who about 200 years ago gathered traditional European folk stories together. However, it's really more global than that. It's part of many different cultures. The earliest version of the story that I've been able to find goes back to ancient India and is Buddhist. There once was a grandpa who lived with his family. And as Grandpa got older, he began to spill and slobber his food. And the family was grossed out. And they said, "You're going to eat at a table by yourself." And the old man, at times, his hand would shake, and he dropped his dish on the floor, and it broke. And the family went ballistic. They yelled and screamed at him, and they bought him a cheap wooden bowl to eat instead. So this food would get all slobbered together in this bowl, and he would eat by himself. Grandpa was so unhappy. Now, one day, the young grandson was working with wood, and the parents asked, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm making a wooden bowl." And they asked, "Why? Why are you making a wooden bowl?" And he said, "Well, for you two to use, Mom and Dad, when you two get old and have to eat at a table by yourselves." And that hit them really hard. And they realized how they were mistreating Grandpa because they imagined the same thing being done to them. And they decided to change. And henceforth, Grandpa would eat with the family. And if he sometimes slobbered a little bit, no big deal. The heart of the golden rule is switching places. What you do to Grandpa or to someone else, you imagine being done to yourself. And you ask, am I willing that if I were in that situation, I would be treated that way? The golden rule seems simple, but the usual wording can give strange results. So many academics reject the golden rule as vague and riddled with difficulties, and really not a very good idea. This is a little stupid folk principle that leads to absurdities once you begin to analyze it. So it's mostly ignored by philosophers and theologians, and in an intro course about ethics and philosophy or theology, you might not even hear it. Or if you do, it perhaps is dismissed very quickly. I think this might be a good test if you're hiring someone in the philosophy department of their philosophical ability. Give them 30 seconds to refute the literal golden rule. Now, I think it's a good principle, but it needs a little bit more finessing. You need to be a little bit more careful about the wording. And so I put an improved wording. Whoa. Just got to catch the focus. Okay, let's see how this works here. Now it works. Okay, I put an improved wording on my T-shirt, and it says, treat others only as you consent to being treated in the same situation. There's a lot of subtlety in that wording, and some of that will come out a bit. The golden rule, as I see it, is a consistency principle. Doesn't tell you exactly what to do. It doesn't distinguish right from wrong. It doesn't replace ordinary moral principles, or it doesn't replace other ethical theories. It more supplements. It gives a tool of consistency that is, however, very useful. You violate the golden rule if you combine two things. If you do something to another, and yet at the same time you're unwilling that this be done to you in the same situation. The golden rule, far from being a vague platitude, is a precise consistency requirement. You're thinking of doing something to another person, like Grandpa. Imagine the same thing being done to you in the same circumstances. If you condemn the action done to you, you're condemning yourself. Switching places is a golden idea that's global and beautifully simple. It promotes justice, consideration, and cooperation. But alas, there are ways to screw up the reasoning. And I call these golden rule fallacies, and I'm going to mention 5 of them. The first one is the most important one. The literal golden rule fallacy assumes that everyone has the same likes, dislikes, and needs that we have. And here are these all have little stories. And the first little story is called The Monkey and the Fish, and it comes from Africa. There once lived a monkey and a fish. And the monkey was a golden rule monkey, always wanting to treat others as he wanted to be treated, but he applied this pretty foolishly. Now, one day, a big storm came to his island, and the rainwaters came and the floodwaters rose, and the monkey was afraid for his life. And so he saw a tree with a high branch, and he went to it, and he reached up to the high branch and lifted himself out of the water to safety. But then he looked down, and he saw a fish struggling in the water. And because he cared about the fish, he reached down and grabbed the fish out of the water and lifted him to safety on a high branch. Now, of course, that didn't work. The fish died. He applied the golden rule too literally. Treat others as you want to be treated. Well, he wanted to be lifted out of the water himself. Well, then you should lift the fish out of the water. That's what the literal golden rule would say. But he didn't bear in mind how monkeys and fish differ. If you take a monkey out of the water, it saves it. If you take a fish out of the water, it kills it. Another example of why not to take the golden rule too literally. Suppose that I'm a waiter at a restaurant and I hate broccoli, which I do. Yuck. I hope we don't have any for the snacks. And suppose that Becky comes in as a customer and she loves broccoli. You like broccoli? Yeah, okay. Becky comes in and she orders broccoli. Should I serve her broccoli? Not by the literal golden rule. I don't want people to serve me broccoli, so I shouldn't serve her broccoli. She'd be mad, and I'd probably get fired. But again, the literal golden rule. If you don't want people to serve you broccoli, don't serve them broccoli. Against the literal golden rule, it can be wrong to treat others in their situation, which may be different from mine, as I want to be treated in my situation. Maybe the situation's different. Maybe we have different likes and dislikes and needs. So a lot of people have complained that the golden rule is really simplistic. It assumes that we all have the same likes and dislikes and needs, and how I want to be treated in my situation is how I should treat someone in another situation. How dumb is the golden rule? Or maybe it just needs a qualifier. Maybe it just needs a same situation qualifier, as indeed has been the standard move since the early 1600s. People are experts on the golden rule. Now, fortunately for us, the island with the foolish monkey also had a wise monkey. Now, Kita was a wise golden rule monkey, and she learned how monkeys and fish differ. And when the storm came and she saw the other monkey taking the fish out of the water, she was tempted to do this herself. But then she thought of how this action would affect the fish. It would kill it. And she imagined herself in the exact place of the fish. And she asked a more sophisticated question. Am I now willing that if I were in the same situation as the fish, then I be taken from the water? Note the same situation. Am I willing that if I were in the same situation as the fish, then I'd be taken out of the water? And she said, gosh, no, this would kill me. And so she didn't take it out of the water. So treat others only as you're willing to be treated in the same situation. Probably the most important point about the golden, although there's others too. Going back to the broccoli example. Again, I'm a waiter in a restaurant, and Becky orders broccoli. You want broccoli. Now, the right way to ask it is, am I now willing that if I were in the same situation as Becky, who actually likes this stuff, that I be given broccoli? And yeah, sure. There's no problem. The same situation clause is a great help. Now, by a marvelous coincidence, Kita is, besides being the name of a golden rule monkey, is also an acronym for using the golden rule wisely. Kita stands for Know, Imagine, Test, Act. My suggestion on some of the more important parts of applying the golden rule. First of all, you have to know, how would my action affect others? So I'm going to take the fish out of the water. How would my action affect the fish? And the fish might be different from me in some ways, maybe have different needs, maybe have different likes and dislikes. So I got to imagine myself in the place. Well, that's the second one. You know how it affects the other person or fish, and then you imagine, what would it be like to have this done to me in the same situation? And then you test for consistency by asking the golden rule question. Am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, then this be done to me? And if not, and you act this way toward the other, you're violating consistency. And finally, you got to act toward others only as you're willing to be treated in the same situation. The most subtle part of this is the question. Am I now willing that if I were in the same situation, then this would be done to me? Remember, willing that if. This is almost always screwed up by people. Now, my favorite historical example of the Kita procedure is a civil rights speech by President Kennedy, years before many of you were born. It was a speech against segregation on the occasion of the first black enrollment at the University of Alabama. And even though Kennedy was totally ignorant of golden rule monkeys. Still, his speech pretty much followed this pattern. Know, imagine, test, act. First of all, he tried to get white Americans to know how they were treating black Americans as second-class citizens, and as in terms of job opportunities, in terms of educational opportunities. They couldn't go to the University of Alabama, in terms of not being able to vote, and so on. He went quite detailed. You know, how are we treating others? And then he encouraged imagination or role reversal. Imagine that you are treated as a second-class citizen in this way for your skin color. And then the test question, he asked whether they would be content to being treated that way in the same situation. And he thought that they wouldn't be. So he challenged them to act on the golden rule. And in terms of actions, in terms of change of heart, in terms of civil rights laws. And he summed up his speech. Oh, I get two microphones this way.
The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities. Whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated.
The heart of the question. And I would say that the heart of morality is the golden rule. Actually, I'd say the heart of morality is the golden rule. And the heart of the golden rule is switching places. What you do to someone else, grandpa, maybe someone of a different race, maybe someone that your culture has encouraged you to mistreat, maybe gay people, maybe people of another religion. What you do to another, you imagine it being done to you. You switch places in your mind. And to avoid the literal golden rule fallacy, you can imagine yourself in the exact place of the other person, having the other person's likes and dislikes and needs and so forth. Okay, I mentioned that this question is a little tricky, and that leads into our next fallacy. Okay. It needs to have the focus for the clicker to work. Okay. The next fallacy, the soft golden rule fallacy, assumes that we should never act against what others want. There once was a baby squirrel named Willie. And Willie was a very curious squirrel. He always wanted to try new things. And one thing he wanted to do was stick his fingers into electrical outlets. He knew nothing about electricity. He was just playing around. Okay, now Mama Squirrel was a golden rule squirrel, but foolish. And she asked, baby squirrel wants to put his fingers in electrical outlets. Does the golden rule let us stop him? And she said no. She said, if I were in his place, I'd be a little baby squirrel, ignorant of electricity, and I wouldn't want to be stopped from putting my fingers into electrical outlets. So if I were in his place, I wouldn't want to be stopped, and so I shouldn't stop him by the golden rule. And so she didn't. And so he stuck his fingers to the electrical outlets, and was electrocuted and died. Very sad example here. Foolish Mama Squirrel asked the golden rule question wrongly, in a way that forced her to follow Willie's desires. She should have said, remember I was saying willing that if? She should have asked it this way, am I now willing that if I were in Willie's situation, then I'd be stopped? Am I now willing, knowing what I know about electricity, am I now willing that if I were in his place, I'd be stopped from putting my fingers in it? Oh, and she'd say, sure. She might even be very thankful for when her parents stopped her from doing such foolish things when she was young. Sometimes we need to act against what others want. We need to stop a baby who wants to put his fingers into electrical outlets. We need to refuse a salesperson who wants to sell us an overpriced product. We need to fail a student who doesn't work. We need to defend ourselves against an attacker. Or we need to jail a dangerous criminal. We can do these consistent with the golden rule as long as we're willing that if we were in their situation, then we would be treated that way too. In the case of the judge and the criminal, dangerous criminal, the judge who sentences the criminal to jail should be able to say, if I do such awful things and am a danger to society, please lock me up too. Three, the doormat golden rule fallacy assumes that we should ignore our own interests. There once was a woman named Frazzled Franny. And Franny thought that to be a good person and to follow the golden rule, you always had to say yes to what other people asked. You always had to do what they wanted. Now, you might click that this is the previous fallacy. Yeah, okay, this is kind of a corollary. So she always did what people asked. And people learned about that and said, hey, we can take advantage of her. So they asked her more and more outrageous things. Please lend me $50,000 without interest. And she would say yes. She thought if you ever said no to someone's request, you were a bad person and violating the golden rule. And they would ask her, please take care of my 3 children while I go on vacation for 4 months. And she said, I gotta say yes. Soon she had no life of her own. She was a doormat for others, and she was very frazzled. I love that graphic. Doesn't she look frazzled? It's wonderful. Now, for every Franny, there's a dozen Franny wannabes who sometimes say no to others, but feel guilty about that, like they're bad people if they say no to a request from others. But neither side really understands the golden rule very well. You can say no to another's request consistent with the golden rule as long as you're willing that people say no to you in similar circumstances. And so she says, but hey, I'm willing that others say no to me in similar circumstances. The golden rule should build on self-love and extend this to others. It should not destroy self-love. In fact, the golden rule doesn't work as well if you don't have self-love. If you don't have self-love, you've got to develop this. You have to say to yourself, well, as other people have needs and rights that ought to be respected, so too do I. The clicker works. Number 4. The third party's golden rule fallacy assumes that we should consider only ourselves and the other person. There once was a student named Pre-Law Lucy. And Lucy wanted to go to law school and realized that you need good grades. However, she was like a wee bit lazy, and her grades weren't so good. However, she had a solution. She would go to her teacher and say, please give me an undeserved A so I can get into law school. That won't hurt you, and it'll help me, so there's no golden rule violation there. But alas, Lucy ignored third parties. We have to satisfy the golden rule toward all affected parties. If she gets into law school dishonestly, she's bumping someone else. Imagine that you're in the place of the person who's bumped from law school because someone else gets in dishonestly. Or if she becomes a lawyer, gets in, and she'll probably end up in dishonest lazy lawyer like she is now, a lazy, dishonest student. Imagine that you have to deal with a lazy, dishonest lawyer because someone helped her get into law school dishonestly. You have to satisfy the golden rule toward each affected party. So that, let's say if our action affects X, Y, and Z, then we must be willing that it be done in the place of X, or in the place of Y, or in the place of Z. And the affected parties can include future generations. And this leads to what I like to call the carbon rule. Keep the earth livable for future generations as we want past generations to have done for us. My last fallacy is number 5, but this one gets 2 stories. Okay. The easy golden rule fallacy assumes that the golden rule gives an infallible test of right and wrong that takes only seconds to apply. You just whip out the golden rule as your moral compass and it points in the right direction. No pain, no work. It's just bang, you follow it. Really easy. Sorry, not so. You need knowledge, imagination. Sometimes those are hard work. There once was a woman named Electra. And Electra got her facts horribly wrong. She thought electrical shocks were very pleasurable. Severe electrical shocks she thought was very pleasurable. They're not. She thought that. And she gave it to others, and yes, she was willing that these be given to her because she thought they were pleasurable. She satisfied golden rule of consistency. However, she can be faulted for not getting her facts straight. To lead reliably to right action, the golden rule needs to build on knowledge and imagination. It works together. The golden rule consistency works together with other things. More than that, too, but this is the simplified version. Another story. There once was a coal mine owner named Rich. And Rich was very, very rich. He made a huge fortune from his coal mine and paid his workers very, very little, let's say $1 a day. And I got this story because I taught for a couple years in eastern Pennsylvania. And I heard all about these evil coal mine owners. And you can see their big mansions. Now, suppose that someone asked him, well, let's apply the golden rule. Are you willing that if you were in the place of your workers, you would be paid only $1 a day? Knowing that your boss is making this huge fortune? And he said, yeah, I'm willing. $1 a day is a lot of money. You can live very well on $1 a day. Let's say he was wrong, but that's what he believed. He was consistent with the golden rule, given his faulty beliefs. And we might show him that his beliefs are wrong by maybe giving him $1 and saying, let's go to the grocery store and buy food for your family for the day. And he would probably learn that it's not really enough, especially for the boss is making this huge fortune. Let's change the example a little bit. Suppose now that Rich goes through kind of a moral conversion, and he wants to apply the golden rule more wisely to how he runs his mind. Okay, he wants to really do it right this time to his mind. What should he do? How can he apply the golden rule wisely? Well, Kita, no imagine, test, act. First of all, got to know how his policies are affecting the lives of others, especially the workers. So you have to maybe talk with the workers, understand their problems, and how are the policies affecting their lives, the lives of the children, their children of the workers, maybe the safety standards, a lot of things. And he'd also have to understand how his policies are affecting the lives of others. What? Isn't this coming through? Oh, can you hear me?
Oh, hard to hear.
Okay, well, I will Talk louder then. Okay, so Rich needs knowledge of how his policies are affecting the lives of others, and he also needs imagination. He needs to be able to imagine himself in the place of those affected by the policies, like the workers. Like, imagine that his family is growing up under the same conditions as the families of the workers. And then he asks the test question, am I now willing that if I were in that situation, I and my family would be treated the same way by these policies? Suppose that the answer is no. Then he's got to change things. He's got to change his policies. What should he change them to? The golden rule doesn't say. It doesn't tell him. He's got to figure that out himself. He's got to apply creativity. He's got to somehow reimagine the company and how it could work and how this is going to affect everyone. How does he do that? Maybe get suggestions. Maybe talk with someone else who runs a similar company. Maybe go for a long walk and pray about it and think of the place of the different people and come up with ideas. The golden rule doesn't tell him what policy to pick, but it gives a test. Any policy he endorses has to be something that he's willing to live with regardless of where he imagines himself in the situation. And it probably won't be ideal for anybody. It'll probably be kind of a compromise. But it's got to be something he can live with regardless of where he imagines himself in the situation. Finally, he's got to act. He's got to act toward others only as he's willing to be treated in the same situation. It's a fairly simple formula. However, it can be really hard to apply because you need knowledge, you need imagination, sometimes you need creativity and other things. And we'll never have perfect knowledge and imagination unless we're God. We will always not know a lot about how our actions affect others. We'll never perfectly be able to imagine ourselves in the place of another person. But we can do these things better or worse. And it's important that we try to do them better rather than worse. The fact that we can't do these perfectly is not a good excuse for not trying to do it as well as we reasonably can. Okay. Why does consistency require the golden rule? Suppose that I act in a given way toward Grandpa, but I'm not willing that I would be treated that way in the same situation. Why is that inconsistent? The explanation is a little technical and complicated. If you catch it, fine. If not, don't worry too much. There's an even more complicated and technical version of this in kind of a beefy chapter of my logic book. And I finished my logic course, my graduate level logic course, which I had at Loyola last semester, with the formalization of the golden rule consistency approach and a 35-step formal proof of the golden rule in symbols. It's truly awesome. So just be thankful you aren't getting that, although they kind of liked that at the end. It was a challenge. The golden rule in my mind rests on two more basic consistency requirements, which I somewhat arbitrarily call conscientiousness and impartiality. Conscientiousness is the requirement that your moral beliefs are in harmony with your life, how you act, how you resolve to act, how you want other people to act toward you, and so on. And impartiality is the requirement that we make the same evaluation about the same action, regardless of where we or others fit in the situation. Those can be expanded, but life is short. So the argument goes, if you're conscientious and impartial, then you'll follow the golden rule. You won't make Grandpa eat a part unless you're willing that you be made to eat a part in the same situation. So how does this work? Well, if you're conscientious, you won't make Grandpa eat a part unless you believe that this would be all right or permissible for you to do. You won't act in a way that you didn't think was all right or permissible by conscientiousness. But by impartiality, if you think it would be permissible for you to do this to Grandpa, you'd also think that it would be permissible in the same exact circumstances, situation, to be done to you. But then if you're conscientious, you wouldn't believe that unless you'd be willing that you would be treated the same way, that way in the same situation. So if you're consistent in the sense of impartial and conscientious, you will follow the golden rule. You won't do something to Grandpa unless you're willing that if you were in that situation, you'd be treated the same way. If you got that, fine. If not, don't worry about it. So the golden rule can be given an abstract consistency, justification, and the same sort of justification can defend a lot of other variations on the golden rule. So you might imagine, for example, your daughter on the receiving end of the action. Or you might test the consistency of not your action but a moral belief or a desire. There are a lot of variations on the golden rule which logically and historically are quite fine. They all have to have same situation clause too, but there's many, many variations. So the golden rule is more a family of related principles than it is a single principle. And that's kind of important when you look at all the different formulations. It's also important that the golden rule can be, and logically and often is, historically, part of a lot of different approaches to ethics, philosophical approaches, religious approaches. For example, how do you justify a moral principle? Those of you in an ethics course are probably studying that there are different points of view on that. Well, the golden rule you could defend as a self-evident moral truth, or perhaps be consistent as a self-evident moral truth. And the golden rule derives from that. Or the golden rule could be defended as built into moral language, like R.M. Hare years ago, or as God's will, as revealed in many different religions. Maybe that's the basis for ethics. Or maybe the golden rule is a social convention and you accept it on that means. Or maybe from your personal feelings or its social usefulness or self-interest or a social contract. It can be given a lot of different defenses. And the golden rule is also part of a wide, I'm surrounded by microphones, wide range of different religions. One of my best friends, he's also a golden rule fanatic, is Paul McKenna. He's the interfaith director at Scarborough Missions in Canada, and he came up a few years ago with this marvelous poster of the golden rule in different religious traditions. So in the middle as the globe, the golden rule, and then you have like Islam formulation, Baha'i, Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, etc., etc. Paul calls this instant interfaith. You look at it and you see, yeah, the religions disagree on a lot, but there are areas too where they tend to come together. This is all over the world in many different languages, and Paul has sold about 100,000 copies of these. And they are in prominent places like the United Nations and many state departments throughout the world, etc., etc. Whoa, okay. My notes. I need more hands. Yeah. A few months ago, I did an article for a Persian journal on the golden rule in Islam, which I find kind of interesting. 3 of my books are in Persian or Farsi, And there's a lot of interest there. There's a lot of interest in the Golden Rule all over the place. I get emails from people all over the world who are different religions, who are concerned about the Golden Rule. So, different philosophies, different religions. The Golden Rule can be a point of unity in a diverse world. However, being Christian, most of us Jesuits are, I want to say a little bit about the Golden Rule in Christianity. In the Gospels, it occurs in two places. Matthew's Gospel, the Sermon on the Mount, so always treat others as you want to be treated, for this sums up the law and the prophets. And of course, you know, the law and the prophets was their way of referring to the Jewish scriptures. So it's a summary statement of the Jewish scriptures. And in Luke's Gospel, it's a little simpler. Do to others as you would have them do to you. The Golden Rule connects with the Gospels and the Gospel message in lots and lots of different ways. Let me just mention three. First, one of the great rivals of the Golden Rule is treat others as they treat you. People are good to you, your friends, you're good to them. If people are bad to you, your enemies, revenge. Yet even, love your friends, hate your enemies. Jesus was very much opposed to that, one of the chief rivals to the Golden Rule. He said, love your enemies. Love your enemies. And his great story, Jesus loved stories too. His great story about this was the Good Samaritan story, which is an interfaith story. It's involves a Samaritan and a Jew, and they were of not exactly the same religion. The Samaritans were looked upon as heretics, and the two groups generally hated each other. And so love your enemies? Well, the story is about a Samaritan helping a Jew who's been beaten, robbed, and left to die. Now, it doesn't explicitly mention the Golden Rule, but maybe that was part of it. Maybe the Samaritan was walking along and he saw this Jew beaten, robbed, and left to die. And maybe he said, this could have been me. If it were me, should someone stop and help? Another connection. The Gospels tell us things like, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. The good you want for yourself, mercy, justice, forgiveness, you should give to others. And then you will get it too. God will treat you as you treat others. Now, that is tied in very closely in Matthew's Gospel to the Golden Rule. If God will treat you as you treat others, boy, you better treat others well as you want to be treated. And then living the Golden Rule isn't ultimately going to hurt you. No, it's going to help you. You're going to live better too. We could say more about that, but there's a third point. The Gospels, the Our Father. Of course, the Our Father, you think of our Father. We are children of one God. We're brothers and sisters and have to live accordingly. But I'm more impressed by a later verse in which we ask God, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We, in effect, ask God to forgive us in the same way that we forgive others. If you don't forgive others, you're going to have trouble saying that prayer. We're in effect asking God to treat us as we treat others. If we treat others very badly, you're going to have to pause when you say that prayer, because you're asking God to treat you the same way, to forgive you as you forgive others. So the prayer ties in your relationship with God with your relationship with your fellow human being through the Golden Rule. How cool. Lots more, but the Christian tradition, what about that? Many Christian thinkers over the ages have seen the Golden Rule as somehow central to the moral law that is written on the human heart, in the words of Paul. The Golden Rule is huge in the Christian tradition. Let me just mention a few things. It's part of the Didache, which was the very early Christian summary of Christian beliefs, which starts with love God, love your neighbor, and the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule was endorsed by Augustine as the summary of how to live, and he emphasized that it was part of many different religions. He had been through many different religions in his life, and it was part of, he thought, pretty much all religions. And he was the first one to give a counterexample or an objection to the literal Golden Rule. The first one, at least, that I could find historically to give an objection, which is an astounding thing. I mean, there's so many objections. So I look upon Augustine as sort of a proto-Genslerian on this. St. Francis of Assisi used the Golden Rule a lot. And as far as I can see, he was the first one, at least the first one that I could find, I've done a lot of research on this, to use a same situation clause. I wish it had been Ignatius, but, well, you know, that's life. St. Thomas Aquinas pointed to the Golden Rule as a point of unity between faith and reason, which, of course, was one of his main themes. It's in the Gospels, the Golden Rule, and it's also part of the natural moral law that's built into us, in our minds, and so is known by all nations. And Aquinas also claims that the Golden Rule gives an analysis of what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. It is to treat your neighbor as you yourself want to be treated. There's controversies about that, but I won't get into that. The Golden Rule was also very big in Luther and Calvin and Gratian and a whole lot of other natural law thinkers. And in 1993, the Christian theologian Hans Kung was asked to write a summary statement of what is common to all the religions of the world in terms of ethics. And he wrote a statement based on the Golden Rule, and it got enormous, overwhelming approval by the assembled representatives of the religions of the world at the Second Parliament of the World's Religions, 1993. That's a very historic event for the religions of the world to agree on a global ethics document. The Golden Rule occurs in recent popes, usually when they're talking to non-Christian groups. And they point out, hey, there's a principle that unites us, that you have in your religion, we have our religion in our religion, and may just help us to get along better and build a better, more peaceful world. And of course, it's huge in the interfaith area today. As I mentioned with the poster and my friend Paul McKenna. One of my students sent me an email a couple of months ago about the old man and the grandson story with the wooden bowl. I can't find my wooden bowl here. Used in the homily of Pope Francis. And he pointed out that he learned this story in his youth, and it is indeed one of his favorite stories. Connection. We Jesuits have a slogan, faith and justice. The Golden Rule has to do with justice. I mentioned economic justice, paying your coal mine workers a good wage, and racial justice, the speech of Kennedy. And it's part of faith also, Christian faith, practically every other faith of the world, even the kind of secular faith of non-believers. And so I like to consider the Golden Rule the interfaith justice principle. That's kind of Jesuitical. Okay, so for more on the Golden Rule, see my website. It's a really cool website. A lot of stories, a lot of references, links, videos, chronology. The most recent thing is I brought out a few months ago a series of talks on the Golden Rule produced by this company, and they're on DVD, this company in Washington, D.C., Now You Know Media. And there's a sample one on the page there, which is pretty neat. It gives the history of the Golden Rule up to about 1900 and emphasizes the Golden Rule in a huge range of different cultures and religions and thinkers of the world. And, of course, also my book on the Golden Rule, which this is kind of a summary of a few ideas. But the book relates the Golden Rule to just lots of things, you know, evolution, moral education, history, a lot more on different religions, and so on and so forth. So, that's it. Questions?